Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Sean, and I'm delighted you're joining us for today's ESBC Community Webinar. Today I'm joined by Tatu Zapata and Claire Edgson, who will cover Understanding Data Security Essentials for Dataverse, Fabric, and Copilot Studio. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember to join in on the conversation about today's webinar. Our handle is @ESBC_community, and our hashtag is #ESBC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which is updated with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking the Content tab at the top. Don't let the learning stop here. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining us for our next webinar. AI Power SharePoint, Copilot, Agents, Premium & Co. with Fabio Bonolo, MVP, This webinar will take place Wednesday, 9th of April at 4 p.m. CEST. For more information on this webinar, please check out www.sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Take your Power Platform expertise to new heights at EPC 25. Join a full-day workshop and master everything from Power Automate to AI agents and Microsoft Copilot. You'll learn from top industry professionals and connect with peers who share your passion for innovation. Use code Copilot Week to save €150. But hurry, the offer is only valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more. At Falcon Europe, you can learn about Power BI, Synapse, Data Factory, Azure, Microsoft Fabric, and more. Book your super early bird sale today and save up to €700. Book now at www.sharepointeurope.com/European Microsoft Fabric Community Conference tickets. Attend Europe's premier Microsoft 365 and AI conference for incredible insights and real-world inspiration. Book today and take advantage of our super early bird sale. Use the code Copilot Week to save €150 on your ticket. This offer is only valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more and secure your place. After the webinar, we'll have a questions and answers session. Any questions you might have into the questions box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenters, Tatu and Claire. Thanks for joining us today.
All right.
Presenter, Tatu.
Thank you.
Share screen.
Got it. And hello, everyone. Hello, Claire, as well. Nice to see you and all of you others there on the line. So today we got 1 hour. We got plenty of interesting stuff to get to. Topic of today, we're going to be talking about data security essentials. So not every little nitpicky detail, right, Claire? Just the essentials. We're going to be covering Fabric. We're going to be talking about Dataverse, Copilot Studio, and Microsoft 365 Copilot a little bit at the end as well. These kind of newer additions to the whole data security conversation, but still important. We got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get going. As for questions, we prefer you use the chat, and we'll try to address them at the end. And for as long as we have, let's see how this goes. But let's start off with Fabric. Fabric is one of the new big kids on the block. Microsoft is really putting a lot of development effort into it, which includes crucial stuff like data security controls. We're going to start out with probably the most prolific one. A lot of you might be familiar from the Microsoft 365 side, but Fabric is actually has very solid support for sensitivity label application, meaning those familiar sensitivity labels some of you might also already be using in things like Word documents and emails. Well, they're actually also available on the Fabric side if you do your groundwork, and they're more than cosmetic. So what do we actually need to do to get there? The essentials, remember. So in Fabric, before we get to the configuration part, you can actually apply sensitivity labels to things like lake houses, and of course Power BI contents, also part of Fabric. So semantic models, reports can also be labeled. The cool part here is that Fabric isn't just an island. data comes into Fabric from other data sources. Some of these data sources might also support sensitivity labels. Many Azure sources are like this. Fabric actually supports inheriting labels from upstream data sources. Power BI has done this for a while. And also, in many cases, well, especially for Power BI, content in Fabric might be exported to, let's say, Excel files. Fabric also supports downstream inheritance. So if you turn content into an Excel file, the label will kind of travel. Default sensitivity labels and even API-driven application of labels is supported, but you need to do a few things to get everything set up. I'm going to cover the most important parts. So to get readiness to use sensitivity labels in Fabric, you want to pop into the admin portal of Fabric and tick off a few settings. So you need to enable the tenant level setting, the fundamental one, to allow users to apply sensitivity labels to content at all. That's the master switch. Now you could scope this to as group or groups, or you could allow it for the entire organization. After that, you're going to want to look at a couple of other settings to make sure that if you want to, you can inherit labels from upstream sources and also push labels downstream to things like Excel files exported from Power BI reports. These are both optional, but it's a pretty good idea, in my opinion, to at least enable downstream inheritance. Also, there's a possibility to give some power to the people to allow those workspace admins in Fabric to override any labels inherited from other data sources. It's something that's, let's say, confidential in one data source that flows into Fabric might become, let's say, secret in Fabric because some other data is added in the workspace. So it's a good idea to allow this in many cases. So workspace admins can themselves have a say in what labels get applied. And one more thing I'd like to raise here is that you have the concept of domains, organizing content by domains in Fabric. And if you empower domain admins, take care of those domains of content, then those domain admins can be also, you can also let them set default labels for their domain. This is especially useful if you have labels like a specific label for like HR or finance. And you can let the domain owner for that domain set that specific department specific or function specific default label for content. Might be a good idea, but consider it. So everything isn't admin led. Yeah, so sensitivity labels are available for things like lakehouses and semantic models. Also SQL analytics endpoints and things like this inherit labels from lakehouses in Fabric, just like the same labels as in Microsoft 365, but the setting that I just showed you, the tenant level set, is not everything you need. You actually also need to make sure that the sensitivity labels on the Microsoft 365 side, rather in the Purview portal to be exact, are enabled for use in Fabric. Luckily, nowadays, the same location here, same location called files and other data assets that covers documents in Microsoft 365 also covers Fabric. So you're most likely covered if you're already using sensitivity labels for documents in Microsoft 365. But do note that Fabric doesn't actually encrypt, even if your sensitivity label is set to encrypt content, Fabric doesn't actually encrypt content in the service. However, if you have downstream inheritance turned on, the Excel files and other exported content that inherit the label will be encrypted. So Fabric not encrypted, but the encryption doesn't disappear. It flows downstream and appears in other services. When it comes to licensing, though, there's not huge demands here. You only need the Azure Information Protection Plan 1 or Plan 2, and you need to have, for Power BI items, you need to have Power BI Pro and Premium or Premium per user one. So it's not a huge licensing hurdle, in my opinion. Just something to note, though, it does require PBI Pro or Premium per user for Power BI items in Fabric to be labeled. Not funnily, but interestingly enough, data loss prevention is also actually supported. There's a lot of stuff on the roadmap for this. More features are coming, but even now, you could actually apply a data loss prevention policy and a bunch of rules to Fabric, saying, let's say, content that has the sensitivity label of confidential internal only can only be shared with internal users. So you don't accidentally expose content in Fabric to externals. You can even show policy tips, for example, in Power BI desktop and Power BI service. It's fairly nice, bit bare bones, but covers the most important bits. So DLP for Fabric is supported. There was some, it's metered capability as for pricing goes. So it's tied to, I think it was tied to an Azure subscription. So it's not free, but you don't need a separate license to use it. So it's kind of pay as you go. Just a little note there. Another real fundamental, in my opinion, you need to understand a little bit about workspace access management to make sure access to your data and Fabric is somehow managed. The essentials is to understand that you can add permissions on a 4-tiered level to workspaces that organize content in Fabric. You can add permissions for admins, members. You have permission called contributor and a viewer permission. So different levels of permissions. And the important bit is you can use security groups and Microsoft 365 groups distribution lists and Entra ID distribution lists, of course, in Exchange to manage this membership. And probably the best way to do it too, because then you can use all of the great kit in Entra ID to, let's say, get rid of stale users from those groups. Just one note here that's not obvious, you can actually use dynamic groups also. So you can have, let's say, a Fabric workspace for a certain department or a certain role based on a dynamic group or several. You might want to explore that. So you don't just end up permissioning individual users to workspaces. Audit logs, always important. Fabric, luckily, is pretty well integrated into the Microsoft 365 Unified Audit Log, meaning the same audit log that services like SharePoint and OneDrive interact with. The Fabric audit logs are kind of interestingly not hidden, but not obvious either. If you go to the Purview portal and perform an audit log search, you need to find out what exactly happened, let's say, with a certain lakehouse in Fabric. You'd have to look for the record types under Power BI. Maybe it's because of the roots in Power BI, the Fabric portal is kind of built out from there. I don't know. But Fabric's audit events seem to be bundled under the Power BI, let's say, heading in the Unified Audit Log. So the Power BI audit and Power BI DLP record types are the ones to look out for. You can perform audit log searches and get reports of Fabric events in the Microsoft 365 Unified Audit Log. But yeah, that does happen to get bundled under the Power BI location. As you can see, there's events regarding SQL Analytics endpoints and other Fabric-specific events here as well. And you can get more details by tapping on an individual event. You can export these to a CSV file for closer scrutiny as well if you need to get a specific report of audit events. Now, here's a nifty little bit that you might not know about. If you're using Defender for Cloud apps and you have done the basic setup for it, you're going to be actually able to query Fabric audit events in various places, like, for example, advanced hunting in the security portal. You get a real-time snapshot and queries into Fabric's audit logs. Here also, you can see the Fabric events are under the Power BI workload. So workload has Power BI. That'll net you the Fabric events also, and the Power BI events. Just if you're familiar and you have access to advanced hunting or log analytics, if these events are ingested all the way there, you're going to be able to query for the audit events like this as well. This is actually faster and my preferred way, because you don't have to wait for an audit log search report to complete. Now, data governance is important. Important to keep in mind. We have to keep a handle on our data, on our content, so it doesn't, it tends to pile up over time. So we need to inventorize it, manage it, curate it. And Purview data governance does help with this. Fabric is actually supported. It's not even in preview. It's properly generally available. As far as I know, Purview data governance is the name for a bunch of services, including Purview data map, unified catalog, and more. Purview data map allows you to actually register Fabric as a data source, one of those data sources, then perform scans in Fabric to inventorize information as assets, and also look for sensitive information in Fabric. This is pretty interesting. So you can use this scanning. It's pretty much free, by the way, almost, not literally free, but pretty much free to simply scan contents in nowadays, starting January 6th. So you might want to take a look at this. You can scan Fabric, your Fabric contents, and then use unified catalog to look at the results. Look at the relationships between your Fabric contents, things like lineage, for example, between data flows in Fabric, how content is interlinked. And you can even see and set the sensitivity labels for that content, for these assets as well. And later on build data products out of this. But the funny part here, I keep saying funny, the interesting part is that we're kind of moving from just data governance being a data curation tool to actually extending into security in a pretty easy to approach way. All right, so in case you didn't know, if you scan Fabric with Purview data governance, you have these sensitivity labels here for, let's say, semantic models, lakehouses in Fabric. You can then use something called protection policies in Purview based on this label set in Fabric to actually start to control access to data. Like use this kind of a deny all except those given permissions type of thing here. So you can say certain groups, it's shown as a GUID here, but it's actually an entry group. Certain groups of users, if they have access to certain labeled content in Fabric, can read that content, and certain other groups can have even full access to that content. And anybody who's not on this list, even if they're given permissions in Fabric, will not have access. So you can, if for the most sensitive content, it's a good idea to look at protection policies. They're easy to use as long as you're labeling things in Fabric. Might be easy to overlook, but not for wide use. I would say this is for the most sensitive content. But yeah, the low-hanging fruit here essentially just look to extend those labels. To be honest, that's the first step. Start labeling things, start differentiating sensitive information in Fabric, start scanning it, identifying lineages, lineage information, labels, lineage information, and classifying content, finding sensitive information. Make sure your workspace access controls are in place. That's a good idea, like using groups and not individualized users. Couple of words about Dataverse. It's kind of it's close to Fabric. There are links between them, as Claire's probably better at demonstrating than I am. But Dataverse is also somewhat supported in Purview data governance. It's still in preview. It's been in preview for a good long while. Scanning is also supported for Dataverse. You can find, let's say, personal data in your Dataverse tables by scanning your Dataverse environments, databases. Works reasonably well. You can find out which tables and which columns in those tables contain likely personal data, for example. It's fairly handy from an information risk management point of view. And you can already start to automatically apply sensitivity labels to those assets. It's not in Dataverse itself. So if you open Dataverse, you won't see those labels. But Purview data governance shows them here on these assets that it creates when scanning. In Dataverse, one easy to overlook fundamental is the possibility of actually using column level security. So people have access to environments, people have security roles that give them access to tables, but sometimes you have columns within tables that contain sensitive information. Easy to overlook that you can actually make sure that only certain people can see that specific column of sensitive information. Let's say very sensitive personal information. So what you do is you go to, in Maker portal, you go to a table, you select the column with sensitive information, you mark it as enable column level security, checking this box here. Then you go to the Power Platform admin portal, you create something called a column security profile, a new profile, and you add, select which permissions to this specific table that we marked as, enable for column level security. Which permissions should this security profile have to that table? We can, for example, say that anyone assigned to this security profile is not able to update, only able to create and read data in this column, or not even read it. And then we assign users and groups to this profile. And you can even take this a bit further now in preview. Probably going to be pretty fundamental going forward, to apply something called masking, where you add something called a masking rule to hide data in that column until it's explicitly revealed by people with the permission. Now, Dataverse Power Platform also create audit logs. There's a couple of different options here. Some of the Dataverse logs, when you click the Start Auditing button, it starts generating Dataverse activity event logs in Dataverse. But if you check the third box under the auditing options for a Power Platform environment, the option Read Logs, it starts gathering different log events to the Microsoft 365 Unified Audit Log. Quick breakdown of how these differ. The Dataverse event logs are stored in Dataverse. They take up capacity and include things like create, read, update, delete events for data. For example, and team and role management events. Pretty fundamental stuff. These logs you read through the Power Platform environments, for example, the audit summary view. There's many ways to get to these events. The audit summary view is a pretty legacy tool, in my opinion, but it works up to a point. It has things like, a typical event you might see is something like this. What happened, which records were affected, who did what, when, and what changed. It's pretty basic, but still works. Now, this is the bit that's easy to miss. Activity logs are different. When you choose the Read Logs option, you start getting a whole another set of events. For example, data policy events. Power Platform has data policies that we'll talk about in a second. People launching Canvas apps, connector events, connector changes, flow creation. This will all be in the Microsoft 365 Unified Audit Log, again, scattered across a bunch of different event types. But my tip is to look at the record drop down here and look for events starting with power or record types starting with power. Then you'll find those audit events. Also, you can simply go to, again, advanced hunting if you have caught up events and look for events that have the workload identifier of Power Platform. This is pretty easy. That'll net you all of those Power Platform audit events. Now, at this point, Claire, I do see the time, so don't worry. We'll get to yours in a second. This is the last bit. For all the attendees, probably if you're working with Power Platform, you already have some sort of data policy in place. But if you don't, and you haven't heard about it, it's been around for a long while. Data policies are essentially, I would call them connector policies, meaning to secure your data and keep it secure, you probably want to say something about which connectors can be used together. Can you use the, let's say, I don't know, Google Drive connector together with SharePoint? Probably not in the same flow. So you can block certain connectors and allow others per environment. And my tip would be to, once you create these, to set any new connectors to be blocked before you allow them, so you have a handle on things over time. The bit that's easy to miss here is that you can actually configure a handful of these connectors, like the HTTP connector is probably the most crucial one, to only allow use of them through something called endpoint restrictions. You can configure endpoint restrictions for a handful of connectors, so only specific HTTP endpoints can be called, and it's a pretty good idea if you can do it. So otherwise, the HTTP connector can be used for anything, really. So endpoint restrictions is a pretty good idea also to put in place. Be careful, though, if you have an existing bunch of environments that already have activity in them, don't go simply denying everything else except Graph API, because you don't know what's already running in your environment. You're going to end up breaking a lot of flows. So if you need to know how to find out which HTTP endpoints are already used in your tenant, you can actually ask me if you want to. I can share some techniques I've been developing for this. There's no easy way out of the box yet that I know of. If you know an easy way, share it, please. All right. Bit of a roller coaster ride, but I wanted to make sure that you get kind of touch on the fundamentals. And now at this point is a good moment to let Claire take the stage. Are you there, Claire?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm here.
I'll make Claire presenter now.
Let me take over and
Perfect.
hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep.
Excellent. So let's have a little look at Copilot Studio. What we've got on Copilot Studio is, let me just move that. Sorry, that decided to break itself. Of course it did. Let me see if I can get back to my screen. There we go. Copilot Studio architecture. I always kind of start off with this screen because it helps to understand what Copilot Studio is doing. Everyone just assumes it's lurking in Dataverse, which it is, but it's connected to so many other parts. So when we think about it from a security point of view, you have to understand all the parts that are happening here. We've got the Azure bot service. We're almost certainly using Azure OpenAI and the AI Foundry. It is living in Power Platform. That's where it's going to store majority of what it gets up to. But it does also rely on other things where you may be connecting it to Dynamics or Salesforce and all the hundreds of other connectors we can have. So we want to start there as a thought point. Now, we've just been talking about data loss prevention policies. Copilot Studio has a whole ton of its own, ones that can allow you to control what those Copilot Studios are doing. So you've got everything from deciding who can actually access it, which makes sense. Copilot Studio, along with the rest of the Copilot family, relies on reading both the audience and the data tags. So as Tatu said, you want to look at how you have your documents labeled. We can do a whole session on talking about how you make sure SharePoint's labeled, but it's the rest of your system. So it looks at the audience of the system it's trying to talk to, and it looks at what the security labels are if it's got them. But there are more basic things, like we don't want external people being able to talk to it unless it's a portal. So blocking externals, blocking people from publishing it externally, being able to decide what channels should it appear in. Do you want this to appear on a Facebook? No, typically not. It's like trying to publish things on Twitter. What kind of knowledge sources do we want to limit them to? And it could be no SharePoint or only share certain SharePoints. What kind of triggers do we want it to work on? Those of you who've spent a long time around Power Automate know you can make a trigger that triggers a trigger, triggers a trigger, and we end up with horrible endless loops that completely dumbfound the system. Copilot Studio, like all the copilots, if you connect it up together with automation, can ever feed itself and cause you nothing but pain. And then it's looking at the omni-channel pieces. That's one of the newest parts of the data loss prevention policy. Omni-channel is where we are able to connect through what primarily is known as the contact center tools. It's allowing you to connect with WhatsApp, social media, chat bots, IVR bots, the whole works of I think it's 130 things you can connect to on channels now. Do I want it to go anywhere? If so, which ones am I going to allow? Then we've also got skills that you have within Copilot Studio. What skills do I want to allow and not allow? So a whole bunch of brand new DLPs, like we didn't already have enough, that we can now use alongside Copilot Studio. These data loss prevention policies are in exactly the same places as you're used to finding Power Platform ones, but they are only able to be applied in environments where there is Copilot Studio. These automatically appear if Copilot Studio is created in your environments. You don't have to go and magically turn things on. But just in the same way you do with other DLPs, you have to decide which basket the different connectors go in. So Purview is in preview working with Copilot Studio as well. We've been talking about how we can use security tools to look at it. One of the nice things in this preview, which is very, very close to coming out of public preview now, is being able to look at how we can look at in the test bots when we actually go to publish our bots and our agents and autonomous agents. It will look at, is this the right audience? Do I have the right things protected? If you look at the bottom right hand side of the screen, this is a mock-up from Microsoft at the moment. But one of the nice things is looking at how this can be secured. We've also got tools built in here to look at who's doing what, where and when, who's been on the bot, understanding where it's encrypted. Maybe my bot is reaching out to ServiceNow, SAP. What is the different encryptions that go across that connection? If I've got agent to agent to agent interactions, all more fun. How does that get measured and monitored? So this is there, and those of you who are already playing with Azure AI Foundry, that's in private preview at the moment, and there's some interesting things happening with that too. So very soon we'll hopefully be able to connect up all the dots, just as you saw us playing with Fabric. So also within Purview, this is the old M365 Compliance Center, where we can look at different actions. We're often asked to go, well, can you tell who's doing what? What's been created? just in the same way we can for everything Power Platform, Copilot Studio can also be recorded. It's done out of the box. No buttons are needed. It's already recording your stuff, but this is hiding under the Purview labels. So I can look at what effectively the makers are doing, the agents are doing, what fields are there, can I audit the fields, and it's got an ever-growing list of actions that are tracked. So if you've got security concerns about who, what, where, when, this is the great place to see what my humans are doing. This doesn't cover what data's been changed. So that's where we come back to the Dataverse part with the audit logs you just saw. But this will say who made it, who's been using it, what's been changed, what's been modified. So this is a really nice place to start. Now, if we want to look at more of the performance side, App Insights now also is able to read Copilot Studio, and Microsoft have invested in some really nice things in App Insights. For those of you who use it for apps already, it's exactly the same way we set it up and create it. It can real-time track the performance. It's looking at the error logs. It's probably the best place to date to look at the error logs for Copilot Studio, and also analyze everything the people are doing and the paths on where they get stuck and where things stop. And one of the other things we're often being asked for is, I want to do my analytics. Now, this is a very text-heavy slide, I'm afraid, but it's got some nice links in it, which we'll share this deck afterwards. So these are the things I can also point my Power BI to, whether I'm using Fabric directly or I want to use normal traditional Power BI workspaces. All of these analytics can be read, monitored, and nice dashboards made. We're already doing this with numerous clients to be able to look at the performance angle of our Copilot Studios. So we've got three kind of key areas we've looked at there. We've looked at, how do I look from a management point of view? How do I look at which humans have been on it? How do I look at performance, and how do I look at the analytics behind it? Now, this is a long-winded slide. This again has got all sorts of information. This is about how all the key things that are unique to Copilot Studio. We've obviously got the DLPs, we've been looking at those, and exactly to Tatu's point, the pieces around HTTP requests are super important here, but new in DLP is thinking about which channels to publish in. One of the key things in here is also who can access it. Looking at those audit logs in Purview, those actions of what's happening, actually within the admin center, considering on the Copilot Studio page in the admin center, you can look up various parts of the governance as well. By using App Insights, we can share the records, not only of performance, but who's doing what, also up to Azure Monitor too. Now, we've got to think about the credentials. We've seen in Power Platform, one of the biggest problems we had was service accounts doing everything. Obviously, Copilot Studio is new. It already accepts service principals. If you're using Key Vault or you're using certificates, there are ways to do that already here that are working and in GA. Those working with SharePoint or anything in the M365 space, if you're going to use those on Copilot Studios shared across the organization, those data labels must be on your SharePoint. Is these documents public, private, super secret squirrel? What are they? We should not be building Copilot Studio or any of the Copilots, to be honest, if we haven't already got our SharePoint properly locked. And we always know that people never truly lock their SharePoint properly. Copilots will find everything, all 5,000 versions that you have in the same library. So again, with Copilot Studio, it's understanding which library, which folders that we want to look at. Don't point it at everything. Other things we've got in here is being able to create the security alerts automatically out the box. When we go to publish our bot, that new tester in Copilot Studio doesn't just go, it works. It's analyzing with Purview to see, should you be able to publish it? Have you checked you've got the right rights? Have you got the right audience? So that's already out of the box in that test. Other little things we can add that are part of the COE kit and the Copilot Studio kit is nice little welcome maker messages. First time I've made a bot, it will actually tell me what it expects from me. What are my business rules that say I can make my own thing? And as we get further and further into the autonomous multi-agent world, then we've got to start looking at those triggers. And again, some of this will live in DLP. Some of this may also end up in the M365 Copilot part. So we've got an interesting bundle of controls. And those of you who spent the last few years getting your Power Platform governance sorted, I'm sorry, guys, we're starting again because this is another level of fun. And if I move on. So let's go and look at M365 Copilot, because you kind of go, well, this is Dataverse and this is Power Platform. Why do I care about M365 Copilot? We absolutely do care, because most of the things that Copilot Studio do are also connected here into M365 Copilot. One of the key things for those of you with Dynamics is the Dynamics Copilot for Sales and Service and Contact Center all rely on this Copilot. It's not Copilot Studio until I extend it. So now in Power Platform, we also need to know and care about M365 Copilot. It's probably the most mature of the Copilots, of the 148 different Copilots we have to date. Now, one of the reasons I show this slide is I want you to understand that underneath that Copilot, there are many channels happening. And our friend and our foe in here is the Graph API. Graph is like a really enthusiastic little intern running around, getting everything and bringing it, taking it back. And it doesn't know any better. So Graph is sniffing and reading everything, all the emails, all your OneDrive, all your OneNote, even mail that is sitting in the spam box, in the archive, even things you wrote 6 years ago. It's looking at Teams. So everything that's written or said, Graph can see. It's the ultimate big brother, which is brilliant for an AI, less good for us as humans, because it's reading everything. Now, if we ask it in Teams or SharePoint or Dynamics for Sales, it will look at what it knows already. It will look at what it knows about you, and then it goes off to find out what it can find. And it's learning all the time. So true Big Brother stuff. But Graph is our weak point here because of the fact that Graph can see everything. So from an injection point of view, from an attack, Graph is the door in to everything. So carrying on from what we were talking about, Purview, Copilot, particularly M365 Copilot, understands any sensitivity label and audience automatically. If it's in my tenant, it reads the ones that we've set in Purview. If it's outside my tenant, it will try to read what it can. So also the encryption rights. So if you're using Azure Encryption Management, it also knows it because it's talking to both the rest of Purview, Sentinel if you've got it, but it can read other tools. So from an external data point of view, if M365 Copilot connects to ServiceNow, it can read its sensitivity labels. So we're not starting from scratch. It's not perfect, it's doing its best. It will pick the highest sensitivity label it finds and apply it to that data. Now let's have another little look at how M365 Copilot can find its information, but also how do we know where it's putting it? M365 Copilot is a bit of a splatter gun. Purview will be able to see where everything is. It's doing it whether you know it is or not. But if I've got things happening with Outlook, it will store some of the AI conversations, the questions and answers I make in a folder in my Outlook. If I happen to be doing it on SharePoint, it will put it in a hidden folder in SharePoint. If I'm doing it on Teams or on other pieces like Dynamics for Sales and Service, it puts those questions and answers in my OneDrive. And then there are other places like SharePoint pages where it can put those in the embedded piece. But is it that simple? Those questions and answers may be in more than one place, because Copilot is created in a core place. If I've made a SharePoint M365 agent and I've shared it in Teams, it will put it both in the Teams chat folder and in the SharePoint folder and in my OneDrive. So from a compliance point of view, we need to find all these questions and answers. Are they in the retention policy? Are they not? Who can access them? These hidden folders are hidden from basic users looking at SharePoint or your mailbox, but not to APIs. Luckily, the eSearch that we have with M365 as a whole will go off and find all these and show them to Purview. And again, it is going to enable that only you can see the things you were meant to by your M365 compliance. There's also communication compliance that stops you sending data outside of your business. Just as you have with your emails today, it stops you sending information outside of the right audience or externally. M365 Copilot, it looks at this data and goes, well, that's private, that's super sensitive. It's working on your behalf. And not only does it stop you, but it tells you it's stopping you, and it tells you when you create the agent and when a user's trying to use it. All the standard retention policies we have in M365 today apply across. One of the reasons Microsoft are letting these things disappear into my OneDrive and my mailbox and into SharePoint, it already has a very robust retention policy. So we can see it, find it, act on it. And Purview is watching everybody. So for those of you not so familiar with the M365 piece, there is within the M365 Admin Center now the Copilot control system, and the settings have all the key settings. They're being added to all the time. Things that we can look at to stop the channels, to stop who's external users, to stop it being shared with the wrong people. Almost all of those settings sit under here. And a really big texty slide, and again, apologies, but there's lots of really good information in here. These are all the places that you can find these things, and if you want to know anything more about how this auditing is done, there's a link at the bottom. But one thing, those of you who aren't so close to the M365 family, these are things highlighted that your M365 admins will know how to find. And again, part of why we're doing this is those of you using Dynamics Copilots, this is where your stuff is going. So it's not necessarily sitting in Dataverse, although parts of it can do. A lot of this is going to sit actually at the M365 level. And if we're doing it in Teams, it will be in the chat folders. If we're doing it where we're going to do it actually in Dynamics, it will end up in my OneDrive. So understanding where these things are really important. And Copilot pages is something we're starting to see coming into Power Platform. So again, understanding these pieces, where to find them, and what we need to do are the critical pieces. And that's me. I think we finished nicely and early on time. Any questions?
Amazing.
Is anyone still conscious?
Sorry.
Thank you, Tatu and Claire, for a great presentation. So we'll now get into the questions and answers part. Should you wish to ask questions, please feel free to type in the questions box now. So our first question is, What are the best practices for ensuring the secure use of Copilot Studio agents within an organization?
So firstly, it depends on what you're going to connect it to. If you're going to use it on any of the Office products, so most people start with Copilot Studio on SharePoints, is ensuring that your SharePoint has data labels turned on. So you've identified whether this document is public, private, secret squirrel. And the AI within the Purview will help with that as well, because the new security Copilot for Purview is also helping to be able to preemptively label things based on what they are. So making sure your SharePoint labels are on, but also making sure that when you're going to do SharePoint for Copilot, you actually typically make a new library up just for that Copilot. So you're not reading 15 versions of everything. You're not reading data that contradicts each other. If you're going to connect with things like ServiceNow, it will read the AI connections, but really be clear on the DLP policies. Lock down any channel you don't need for this action, because I guarantee somebody will try and publish it in Teams or publish it somewhere they shouldn't do because they can. Does that help?
Perfect. Yes, so this next question is, how does Microsoft Purview help organizations meet compliance standards like GDPR when working with data in Dataverse and Fabric?
You want to take that, Claire? It seemed like you were ready to answer.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. So Purview is really good at identifying patterns, so PII data, credit cards, passport numbers. Fabric, I think it's really found its place in Fabric. Dataverse, it's coming. It's not quite perfect yet. If you do the data trawl, which Tattoo showed, it can look for standard things. And if you look at the Microsoft Trust Center, it will show you the things that can be done for Dataverse. The GDPR rules are there in the most basic form for Dataverse. So when you do that crawl across Dataverse environments, it can look for patterns, but you need to know what you're looking for. It can do the out-of-the-box GDPR. But if you were in Germany or if you're in banking, there are different rules. So there are patterns you need to set up as well. I think Tattoo and I can talk on that whole subject for an hour.
Yeah, probably the things I've been doing so far in the field are inventorizing the Fabric and Dataverse data estates and looking for perhaps under the radar, structured tables and such that happen to have things like Finland, so Finnish national IDs and other personal data that's considered sensitive under GDPR shouldn't be, retained for too long. So, or rather, in some cases, gathered at all. So that's where we're at right now. Once things get more sophisticated, hopefully we'll someday have even a built-in GDPR assessment or something. But no, as Claire said, you need to know what you're looking for, what types of information are relevant to your organization. Then you can start mapping it out.
Perfect. So next question there is, how can we identify which connector is used in a Copilot agent?
So the first question is going to be in which of the many Copilots. So let's say if it's M365 Copilot has a more limited number of connectors, and the M365 Copilot, it's used to be called the Copilot Hub, that will show you the connectors. If you are using it within Copilot Studio and you're looking at those agents, then you can see which, as you can with Power Apps and Power Automate, which connectors are used. And this is your data loss prevention policy Tattoo showed. For every environment, you should have a data loss prevention policy. So I shouldn't be trying to make a HR-based Copilot Studio in the default environment, for instance, because that should be blocking me from SAP, SQL, Workday, whatever. So the whole principle of how Copilot Studio works with its connectors is very, very similar to everything we've ever done on Power Apps and Power Automate. What we've got extra in Copilot Studio DLP is the channels and who can see it and who can publish it and to where. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, perfect. So just next question there is, environment maker security role includes Copilot agent sharing also.
Yeah.
Is the only way to disable agent sharing is creating a clone env maker role excluding sharing permission, or is there any other way?
Do you want to do this, Tatu? Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd be curious to actually know what you found around this myself.
So within, if it's Copilot Studio, there is some basic ways to limit the sharing. Very soon there's going to be a bit more control, but you can actually choose the audience of who can share it and limit the sharing. And there are also some scripts that, if you want to go down writing a script, that you can also lock it. But actually, and again, if anybody wants to reach me on LinkedIn, I'll send you a script of screenshots of what you can actually do in the Copilot Studio in the Admin Center today that lets me choose whether you can share it or not. And that's also something that Purview's got some handle on, what can share, what can be blocking an agent. We've got some controls that whilst you can make it, it's just the same way as a Power App. You can make it. Can you publish it? Nope. So there are some ways to stop makers being dumb. It can't stop everything stupid because humans are humans, but there are some controls already in the admin center and with the DLP. So they're the places to start, but you can actually put some extra controls on as well.
Perfect. So just next question there is, do the Copilot DLP policies show up under the regular DLP dashboard in Purview?
This is the same thing as Dataverse DLPs turning up under Purview. Do you want to take this, Tatu?
Yeah, I mean, the Copilot actually, you have the certain connections and actions like skills, right? That are only available in environments where you've deployed agents, correct? So you don't have separate data policies just for, but you have certain, correct me if I'm wrong, you have certain connectors with that cover certain activities only available in data policies, the same data policies for those environments where you've deployed Copilot Studio agents.
And from the point of view of Purview, I don't think the Dataverse DLP appears in Purview yet, does it?
No, it does not. So it's kind of actually confusing. Even if you, Microsoft talks about DLP every other day, when you go to the admin portal, it's not actually called DLP, it's called data policies, which is different from data loss prevention. So no wonder people get lost. Yeah, so there's DLP in Purview, and then there's data policy in Power Platform 2, which Microsoft often refers to as DLP also. So
yeah, to answer the original question, the Copilot Studio and Dataverse DLPs don't yet appear in Purview. That is mainly aimed at M365 and Azure, but it's hopefully on the roadmap very soon. But what we've got at the moment is, if you are used to looking at Power Platform DLPs, you will find the Copilot Studio DLP in the same place. And there are some cute little scripts, again, if you want to turn that into a nice Power BI to be able to see which policies applied to which environment, to which particular Copilot Studio. We've got some nice little scripts that you can use to be able to read that.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions, but just a lot of people are asking for the presentation slides. Would one of you be able to send them on to me? And then I'll put them on the recording then, and then people will be able to access them. It's okay.
Yeah, definitely we'll share. It was a roller coaster ride after all, so it's only fair we give out some reading materials.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So
a lot of the slides are reading homework.
Perfect. So on behalf of the ESBC community, we'd like to extend a big thank to you again, Tatu and Claire, for taking out time out to carry this webinar. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks everyone who attended. Appreciate it. Really hope you have a nice day.
Thank you for staying
Perfect.
awake.
So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointurl.com/resource center. Thanks again for all of you for joining us today, and I hope you join us again soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.